Lord be with you. Well, we're going to try something a little bit different today. If you have been following this YouTube channel from the beginning, you'll recognize that these longer form videos started showing up right as quarantine settled in here. So this is when people were required to be safer at home or to shelter in place, whatever the terminology based upon where you were living at the time. And these were just the sort of ways to keep up with some kind of meditations, sermons, spiritual thoughts, to keep the community of faith connected. What has happened is, we didn't know how long this was going to go on. We didn't know that this was still going to be going on, so we kept evolving as time went on. So even after Safer at Home was lifted here in Wisconsin, we kept doing these videos. Even when we could start having in-person worship in abbreviated forms, we kept doing videos to continue to try and connect with people, especially those who don't get out as much, who don't feel safe, who feel compromised. So we've kind of had a wide variety of different styles for these. There has been obviously scriptural meditations. There have been sort of reflections on society and the state of the world. We've done Bible studies in these videos. We have done sort of call outs to different groups in our community and in our church to try and uplift people who aren't able to be visibly or physically connected to one another right now. But now that this thing is still going on, I want to try and do some volumes of a playlist. So the idea in a playlist is we all have these things in our queues in our lives, where we are listening to certain things or reading certain things or watching certain things. And this gets more into the culture and how we utilize culture to sort of get us through our lives, to inspire us, sometimes just to bring us joy or to distract us, whatever the case may be. So in these playlist videos, I'm going to focus a little bit more on talking about cultural media and sort of my interpretations of that, more from a spiritual background, like we talked about in an earlier video about how sometimes films, or I guess we could say media in general, are prayers from our fractured states of view, prayers from our fragmented world up to God. They're imperfect. They fill in different genres, but they do make a good lens through which to view our faith and spirituality. So in order to do that, these videos are not necessarily limited to community members at Zion. These certainly can be utilized for anyone and everyone that you know who is involved in culture in some way, appreciates discussions of culture, and sort of wants to feel a little bit more connected and part of a bigger conversation. So in order for that to happen, I have to talk a little bit from my very uneducated perspective about how I understand YouTube to work, which again is a very imperfect thing. We did not get into YouTube except more as a reactionary thing. But kind of the common things that you can do on a YouTube page are, number one, you can like something. You can click on the like button. If you do that, my understanding is the more likes that a certain video gets, the more likely it is to be ramped up in YouTube's algorithm to be suggested for something that other people might like. So you certainly can click on a like button, especially if you enjoy this particular video and this particular genre that we'll be doing with these videos. The next thing you can do is you can subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And when you click the subscribe button, that just means This channel and the videos on this channel will continue to come up as recommended for you in your normal YouTube searches. Or if you click on the bell icon, you will be alerted immediately when a new video posts from this channel. So I know we also link these videos from YouTube to our Zion Facebook page. And you can share from Facebook. So if these are things that you think other people would benefit from and would be uplifted and encouraged to join kind of the broader conversation, then by all means, let's see if we can connect some more people over some of these thoughts. So this idea of a playlist, I particularly want to focus on a pandemic playlist. So not just movies and music and books that we like in general, but particular things that resonate with the times in which we're living and maybe help us to see them in a new light because they kind of fit in with the pandemic, or they cause us to see the pandemic differently than we would have just watching this movie under normal circumstances or reading this book under normal circumstances. So one of the movies and the first thing I want to recommend to you as part of a pandemic playlist to help get you through the pandemic, to help you think about the pandemic in different ways, is the movie Arrival. So this movie came out in 2016. This is a movie by Denis Villeneuve. I hope I said that correctly. He is a French-Canadian filmmaker. If you have never seen any of Denis' movies before, he is just an outstanding visual storyteller. The way he paces things, the way he gets into his topics, the way he shows instead of telling you all the information is just incredible. This might have been the first film I saw by Mr. Villeneuve. And it was one that I kind of wanted to see, but someone actually recommended it to me. And when I get a recommendation, especially from someone who I kind of appreciate the films that they like and the films that they watch, I am twice as likely to sit down and see it. So I actually didn't see this movie during the pandemic. I had seen it a year earlier, but it came back on my radar in recent weeks and months, and having seen it again, I think this is a great recommendation for a pandemic playlist. So without getting into spoilers, because the plot is very sensitive, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You know certain things. It's more of a slow burn, slow reveal kind of thing. So I don't want to ruin it for you if you've never seen it. I do want you to go out and watch it so that we can discuss it in a little more depth. But it's essentially an alien visitation movie. So yes, it's science fiction. If your version of alien science fiction is more like Independence Day or the movie Aliens by James Cameron, this is not those kind of movies. Those are more action-adventure science fiction. This is more of a dramatic science fiction. So it almost plays out like a procedural of what people would do, governments would do, if they made first contact with an alien species. It's very mysterious. Again, we don't get a lot of information up front. It's an experiential film. You go through it and get knowledge at the pace that the characters are getting knowledge. And it just deals with characters and stories and effects very, very well. I think it's more of a human movie than it is actually an alien movie. So you have to have the right expectations, I think, when you're going into it. But what's so fascinating about the movie is it takes this approach of communication, how we communicate, how we present ourselves, and sort of these two distinct lines of thinking, which are very present in our world, even without extraterrestrials. This idea of responding to things that we don't understand in a more militaristic sort of way, where you're afraid that if you let your guard down and you get drawn in too far, you become too vulnerable. And if the enemy or the other is going to attack you, by the time they do and they make their intentions for harm known, it would be too late. So there's that point of view contrasted with the view of we shouldn't project hostility onto others until we know more. And there's no way to know without being hospitable and being vulnerable and risking. And it pits these two different ways of approaching things against one another, not just in terms of how the humans relate to the extraterrestrials, but also how human nations relate to other nations. And it creates this interesting dynamic of information sharing and information withholding and misperceiving another country's attempts to advance or to take the conversation or the investigation in a different direction. And there's just all these great underlying hostilities and anxieties about our natural fear of other people, other things, things that we don't know, things that we don't understand. And by the end, I really think it is more of a movie about human response to life. How important is life? Knowing what you know about life, all of the pain and the suffering and the misery and the heartache that happens in a person's life, is there still enough good for you to appreciate life, to choose life, to be willing to risk all of those hurts and all of those trials in order to experience the good things? Does the good outweigh the bad? And it asks us very subtly as viewers, I think, to have these philosophical conversations within ourselves. Now, that's just my pitch for the overall story structure. Why I think this movie is great to be on your pandemic playlist is just the way the people react to a worldwide crisis. So when it begins, you have this professor of linguistics going to her evening class and finding it remotely sparse. There's not a lot of people there, and nobody exactly volunteers any information as to why. So she just kind of blows it off and starts the lesson. And as she's teaching, everybody's phones start to sort of go off and chirp all at the same time, one after the other. And she's getting frustrated because all of these people are looking at their phones instead of paying attention to the class and her lecture. And then she realizes too, when her phone goes off, that there is some kind of worldwide emergency happening. And there are all these shots of people camped out in front of TVs watching this unfold. There's the world standing still and people not going to places, and people just getting over inundated with media exposure. And over the course of the film, you start to see that media exposure poison people's thinkings and change the way that they react to certain situations, because you can only sustain so much of that stuff before it changes who you are, before your threshold of being able to deal with things gets compromised. And so many aspects of this movie just reminded me of how we have been journeying through this pandemic. How fed up we get, how disconnected we choose to be sometimes because we're getting over inundated with news. How news can often seem to be more bad than good, and how we continue to have this philosophical structure. Do we want to believe that the situation is perpetually hopeless? Or can we see those moments of good where we believe the good far outweighs the bad? Great movie to watch during this season. I'm going to recommend that you do watch it. And then I'm going to recommend that you use the comment section below. Again, this is very different, right? We're asking you to do a lot of things we don't normally ask. But, if you hated the movie, let me know about it. If you loved the movie and you saw certain parallels in there or certain scenes stood out to you, let me know about it. If there are other movies that you've watched during the pandemic, or music that you listened to, or books that you read that were particularly helpful, list those in the comments as well, and we may revisit some of those in the future. Again, this is hopefully going to be an ongoing thing where we keep trying to offer cultural lenses to help all of us sort of get through this and to get through it better. So in these days of ongoing pandemic, may the peace of God be with you. Amen.